Top of the day to you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wendigo Workshops, and in this video, I will be demonstrating how I bound a leather-covered book with copper wire. This was a very lengthy process, and I learned a lot along the way. Before we begin, however, according to YouTube statistics, less than 1% of my viewers are subscribed. So if you could turn that red subscribe button to gray and ding the bell for notifications, it's free and it helps a lot. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Now the first step in this is to fold the folios. Folios are essentially the little paper booklets that you make whenever you think about making a booklet in elementary school. In this particular book, I am using a total of 15 folios of 4 pages each, creating a total of 120 pages. Sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but when you sew together 15 things, it's a lot easier than sewing together 120. When making these folios, the most important part is to almost fold the edges together perfectly and align them perfectly. Otherwise, you will not come out with a very clean look for your book, and it will be of a much lesser quality. The next step after you finish folding the folios is to number them and mark the hole placement. This allows you to maintain not only an even alignment, but also to maintain an even tension. After all, if your bindings are uneven, then your book is going to be uneven, and in the final product, it's not going to look very good. To poke the holes in the folios down the middle, I use a little leather needle, and I poke it right down the middle on my marks, and I make sure that it goes through the middle of the spine of the folio on all of the folios. Otherwise, you're going to have slippage, and it's going to show through the middle of the folio rather than just through the center of the folio, which is going to make the book of a lesser quality and look less good when you actually open the book. Next, I created the foundation of what I would bind the folios upon, what I call a binding cord, rather than the actual binding thread. The binding cord is what you see on the back of the tomes of covers, and the little ridges that you see, and the binding thread is what you use to tie the folios to it. In this instance, I took a piece of copper wire of the same thickness as the binding thread, folded it over a few times, and then I tied a knot on one end, as you can see here, and I put it on what's called a drop spindle, which is a tool used in weaving and spinning to create thicker threads. I used it in this instance to create a thicker copper wire to bind the folios to, because you need a lot more density and a lot more strength and a lot more thickness in order to get those nice ridges and for the book itself to last longer. And it's also something that I show later on that brings in a key component of using this thicker wire over just regular thick thread.
The next step is to sew the folios with the binding thread that you are using, in this instance a 30-gauge piece of copper wire. You thread it through the hole, then you thread it through the second hole, then you slip over one of your binding cords and to the folio, hold it down really good, then you slip the binding thread over that and tie it through the hole next to it and repeat the process. As you go along with the later folios, make sure that as you're binding the threads, you adjust the bound cords as you go along to make sure that you have enough room on both sides and that they don't slip, and make sure that you've got your holes aligned with your numbers. This way, again, you maintain your even binding and even alignment of the pages. The next step is to attach the cover flaps. These are made from a fairly thick cardboard, thin cardboard that is a lot more dense than your typical box cardboard. This way it tends to last longer. An easy way to get some of this is to purchase a multi-pack of paper that has this in between two layers of paper, as I did, and then you just cut it in half to match the size of your pages. Once you have the wires through the holes, and then you fold it over and around, and then comes the tricky part. You got to get it back through and around, and then twist it. This is why I bound it with wire, because then if there's tension issues, you can just untwist it, retighten it, and then retwist it. And you don't have to redo a knot or possibly rebind the whole book. An easy way to get that good tension that you need, the maximum tension you need, is to use a pair of pliers, like I did here. Here I used a pair of shoemaker's pliers because I just couldn't find my other pliers. This is not a necessary step in using the shoemaker's pliers, just use whatever you got on hand. After you get the cover flaps attached, the next step is to sew on and sew together the tops of the pages. A lot of people will tend to do this with a thick cord and embroidery floss and to create an interesting pattern to the tops and bottoms of their books. Me keeping with this theme, I just kept with the copper wire, because if I'm going to show it someplace, the best place to do it is in here, as well as in the structural integrity of the book. It just continues with the usual process. I lay out some of my thicker wire cord, and then I thread the needle through, wrap it around 3 times, and then I stab into the next folio, wrap it around 3 times, then I just rinse, wash, repeat. Now, before we go any further, I want to say that I did do some off-camera work to the spine. Yeah, I found some gauze to go on the spine that is meant to hold the book together. Basically, you find the gauze, you cut out the amount you need, you lay it out, then you drizzle some glue on it, then you spread it until it's all nice and permeated into the cloth. Then you lay the book down, center, fold over, and then press it in, and then leave it to dry in a clamp or something. Anyway, the next step is to make the underlayment for the front cover of the book. Since I'm using a leather book and I want this design to show through, I had to cut out another piece of cardboard to glue onto this layer of the front cover. And now I will be using even more contact cement than I have been using with other projects. And basically, contact cement is an extremely powerful glue used in leatherworking. And in order to get this right, I had to make sure that I had the correct orientation in the book. Otherwise, it wasn't going to fit right with the way that I cut the cardboard. Again, basically, I drizzle on the glue and make sure I've got it evened out, and then I paste it onto the front cover board. Once you get everything glued in, then you gotta find something suitably heavy to weigh it down so that the contact cement can properly cure and set. Otherwise, things are gonna not be laid out flat and be all wibbly wobbly. So, good bit of weight, some nails and everything ought to help keep this weight down. Now that the contact cement has had time to cure and didn't be all nice and flattened out, hey, that looks very beautiful. And then it is time to cut out the leather for the cover. What I'm using is a Weaver Leather specialty leather called Oxford Pole Leather. You can't get this anymore, unfortunately. I caught this on a massive sale, but it wears well, and it has an ability to grow really beautiful with age as it takes more abuse. It changes colors. You'll also be seeing me use this quite a bit in future projects and in future videos. I love this stuff. In order to get the proper size and shape for the cover, I lay out the book with a little bit of excess on the top and the sides. Then I fold it over and then mark a little bit ways over with my handy dandy little awl, and then I trace it down, trace, and then afterwards I cut. Once the leather for the cover is cut, I make sure that it's centered and I start marking out where things are going to fold, how things are going to sit when stitched. And then, as you can see, I start folding things over so I can get things set for the stitching part of the cover, which does not come quite just yet. Once we get all the folding and marking out done, it's time to revisit with our good old friend contact cement. Once again, we are using a lot of the stuff, and once again, I spread it out very thin, very evenly with a scrap piece of cardboard that I happen to have on hand. This took a little bit, but it's definitely worth it in the end to get things spread out the way that I did. You can see here that I'm rubbing in on those impressions and in the voids that were left behind, kind of from when we did our secondary layer on the front cover earlier. This is to make sure that, yes, these are brought out in the final product, and so that they are also glued down and that everything's structurally sound and they won't just pop right back up again in the final product. These will also serve as channels for the glue for the gold leaf when I go to do gold leafing later on. You can see that I'm using the handle of my styluses to roll in and emphasize, while the glue is still drying, the ridges on the spine that I wanted to have emphasized for the tome look from when I did the initial binding on the book. This was actually something that I did not consider that I would have to do, but I like how it turned out. After I got the front cover sewn on, sorry I did that off camera, but it would have taken too long to record, I then worked on applying the gold leaf. This was a very tricky step as I had never done this before, but I eventually got the hang of it. First you gotta brush on the sizing, which is what the glue for the gold leaf is called. Then you've got to let it dry for a bit until it is very, very tacky to the touch, but still not wet, and also not dried so long that it's not tacky anymore. It's a very hard sweet spot to hit. As you can see, I had to kind of learn this the hard way. Again, this was my first time working with gold leaf, but I got a hang of it in the end. you will inevitably end up with what I call spectator dust, which is gold leaf that kind of sticks on the outside of where you tried to apply it even without adhesives. But in order to get rid of this, you just need a damp Q-tips or a damp paper towel or a damp cloth, and being very careful as to not scrub too hard, otherwise it's going to show in the leather or remove more gold leaf than you wanted. That's going to be a pain to try and reapply. The next step after you finish the gold leafing and seal it, and after all that, after you sew the back cover, as you can see, which I did off camera, sorry about that, is to glue on the pages to hide said stitching and make the look overall neater. To start, I took a piece of the same paper I used for the pages, and then I folded it in half and then cut it. After folding the pages and cutting it in half, I then tested the fit to see if it would work. Then I got to work in preparing to apply the contact cement. Here I rolled a piece of paper to act as a spreader and evener, as a way to make sure that I didn't have any excess strips. Then I applied quite a bit of contact cement. Then, as you can see here, I propped the book open and got to work with spreading the glue. As you can see here, I started applying it on the edges of the seams too, to make sure that I could be able to hide those as well. Once the glue is made somewhat even, I then pressed one of the half pages that I prepared beforehand and started working on pressing it down so that it would fit into the crevices and cracks and all that, so that it would be able to make maximum contact with the contact cement. Then I repeated the process with the other side of the book. And with that, folks, the book is done. I love how it turned out. I hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for watching. And if you liked it, please share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, I'm Wendigo Workshops, and I have been your host.